Fox Theatre. It's like the Redwood City.
Welcome to Startup Grind 2018.
There's so many opportunities to network with other people, meet them, and also get advice from so many people, get some more knowledge, listen to some really amazing speakers. Everybody's so interactive and social, and we're learning so much and having a great experience.
But there's one very special thing here today. It's actually his birthday.
I'm Mxapp from Pakistan. Yeah, this event is really helped. It's like overwhelming of being here.
Like this event, really like Startup Grind in general, has been a huge experience. It's not every day that we get to come down to San Francisco.
I'm Elise from Costa Rica. It's great to see so much energy together. People coming from all over the world.
I'm from Botswana, in Ethiopia.
And Kenya.
And Startup Grind has been amazing.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing.
Meeting amazing startups, amazing people, entrepreneurs in this space.
And to see all this energy is amazing.
Kind of stop it here, but this gives a sense of the global conference that they have. And this year, actually, it's next week, as I mentioned. They have great speakers. I mean, just to walk a few, right? Like Reid Hoffman and like good folks, like folks from OpenAI, co-founder of OpenAI, Greg. So great folks basically. So it's a recommended conference actually from the community and actually coming personally from me as well. And this time it's next week, but maybe you can try to see it next year as well. And we definitely give support from our side as well. So because we are starting this brand new chapter, we are also looking for volunteers to join the team. So if you guys are interested, you can talk to us after the event. Right? Cool. So not taking much time, I'll just quickly walk you through a few values that Startup Grind have. It's the most important thing is not make contacts, but rather make friends. So I would really love for you guys to make a new friend by the time you leave. And I'm guessing there's very selected number of people, but you can definitely make friends with each other. So that's the main thing that they want to convey and give first and help each other, right? And with that, let's start our fireside chat with Parag, Shah.
You forgot to introduce yourself.
Oh, super sorry. Yeah. Correct. So I am Rahul Bhojwani. I'm doing a master's in data science here. This is my second year, and my undergrad is in computer science. I have worked for a couple of years in between, and I have been a co-founding engineer of a company. And this is great. Go ahead.
Hi, I'm Pinko. I'll move yourselves in the camera, but yeah, I am a student here at the University of Minnesota. I'm double major in food systems and computer science, actually, but I have my own company and was entrepreneurship student of the year last year. So, and I'm going to be introducing Parag Shah. You all kind of got to meet him, but yeah, he started his first business when he was in high school, actually, and then studied entrepreneurship here. And was part of the entrepreneurship club while you were here, and then founded Vēmos and Foodsby among the 4 different startups that you've had. I think 4 now?
I think a lot more that failed, yes.
4 main ones, fine. But yeah, I guess I'll just grab a seat and then you can as well.
Sure, yeah.
But yeah, the first question I guess I had was, tell us about how you got started and your first business.
Yeah, so just a little background, so I kind of share with you guys a little bit. Spent most of my life in a suburb of Chicago, of Illinois. I was brought up in a very stereotypical Indian family. Dad's an engineer, mom's a doctor. Brother's now a doctor too. I fell very far away from, the apple tree. And so for me, it was, always growing up, I was someone who just liked solving problems and getting out there, and I didn't have the education that a lot of other people have, and I think that kind of helped shape who I was. And so early on, one of my first jobs, at least I remember vividly, I worked at my mom's medical practice, and she made me file paperwork, all the patient records and stuff she'd make me file before EMR was even a thing or even a thought. I think I got paid $3.25 an hour at the time, And I told my mom, I go, why are we doing this? Like, why don't we just scan all these documents, put them, you know, into a database, and like, let's just like search for this stuff to happen. So she was just like, you're retarded, you're crazy, like, leave. So that's kind of where it started. And then for me, I've always sort of felt like I wanted to start my own business, not really for the same reasons I think a lot of other people do. I just loved innovating, I loved creating. It was something that was second nature even before I knew how to spell entrepreneurship or what the word entrepreneurship even meant. So in high school, I wanted to do something. I wanted to get a job. And growing up in an Indian family, it's like, no, you go to school and you get good grades, that's your job, and we'll take care of everything else. And so my parents like wouldn't let me go like get a real job. And so I was like, no, I want to get a job, I want to do something. And so I was dabbling with a few things to try to like create, and I ended up getting into essentially like refilling ink cartridges, like back when that was a thing. And I went door to door, and I was like trying to sell this service to like my neighbors, and I was like, oh, I'll refill your ink cartridge, you know, when people had inkjet printers in their home. And it just like, it was not that great. Not a lot of people did it. Some people I think just still did it because they like were like, I just need to give you money as charity. But then through that process, I learned that there was like a bigger opportunity with selling, like reselling toner cartridges and ink cartridges to small businesses, like law firms and medical groups, accounting offices, like sort of medium-sized businesses that were typically going to Office Depot or Office Max, and buying at like a very high price. So I essentially one day, you know, figured out who was manufacturing these and selling them to Office Depot and Office Max, and early internet days where you had an AOL CD still, and dial-up. Called these manufacturers up and said, hey, I'd like to, you know, I'd like to figure out how to get involved in this. And like, I lied to them all and said that I was doing $1 million in gross revenue already. And that I was just, you know, looking at other options for different manufacturers to help with my clients. And so I didn't know how much I was going to order right away with them. And so three of them agreed to doing this with me. So
when was that again?
This was when I was a sophomore in high school. So 2004. Jeez, wow, way too long ago. 2004, and so then I went around the area that my parents were, where I lived, going to practices and telling them, hey, listen, give me your invoices that you buy for toner, for printer cartridges, ink cartridges, toner cartridges, and if I can do it for cheaper and you get the same quality, like, would you sign a contract with me? So learned how to sell early on. I remember my mom would drop me like in the summertime would go and drop me to like these outlet malls where there was like the business centers or whatever, where you had like 20 or 40 offices in an area, and I would just literally go door to door, and I would talk to receptionists, and they'd be like, oh, you're cute, and then they would turn me away. But it was great. It was great to learn how to sell, get outside my comfort zone, do things, and so ended up growing that business. We were doing about anywhere between $60,000 and $70,000 a year, which is not a lot, but I figured it was good enough, and that was just like profit. And then I had 2 employees, learned the hard way how to file taxes, and started a company, which I did not do, and I had no idea how to do that. And so that was good. It was a great experience, and then I ended up actually selling that company as I graduated from high school, and helped me pay tuition to this great university, and some other things. So that was cool. It was really my first experience. I would never do it again. That was a turning point where I knew I wanted to innovate versus like be a reseller of something, and that's just a personal choice. I realized that the reason Office Max was so expensive is because they didn't have parents that paid for your food and shelter and didn't have any overhead. So realized that wasn't going to be profitable pretty quickly. Came to the University of Minnesota in 2006. Have never been to Minnesota before I came here, so my first time ever in the state. Lived at Sanford Hall. That was fun, good food. And then, yeah, I wanted to do tech. I love tech. I thought that people went to Carlson and the business school because everyone was an entrepreneur. Found out very quickly that was the opposite. and started my first venture tech company called Lunchbox in 2007. Essentially, out of pure necessity, I am late to everything in life, don't know how to be on time, and I was late to class a lot. And
It's the same thing with me, by the way.
yeah, it's a bad problem. It's really bad.
I can't help it, man.
Me either. I don't know what it is. Even when I know I want to be on time to something, I can't be on time to it.
Exactly.
So there was these lines that happened like at the coffee shops and when I wanted like something in the morning for breakfast. So we ended up creating like the first mobile ordering solution for coffee shops and restaurants. So you can like on your way out the door, you could order what you wanted. It'd be ready for you to pick up. I know this like everyone has this today, so it's like not revolutionary at all. But like back in 2007, they really didn't have this, right? I mean, smartphones weren't even prevalent. I remember my first BlackBerry. It was like the coolest thing in the world. So yeah, we built that system, signed up quite a few restaurants here. One of our bigger brands was Granite City Food and Brewery, if anyone's familiar with that brand. And then learned really, really quickly that the technology wasn't ready for it. We didn't have tablets at that time, so there's no iPads or Nexus 7s or anything like that. So we would install this software in the back of the house computer, and then it would send a signal to their receipt printer at one of their stations at the restaurant, and it would print this order out. For some reason, managers would turn their computer off at the end of the night and they wouldn't restart it. And so we'd have orders queue up and not get processed. And there was all these flaws that happened just because the technology wasn't there. And now you have, Seamless, you have Grubhub, you have all these companies that have tablets that you probably see in the restaurants that are doing such a great job. So we transitioned that product to being more of a menu platform. So kind of replacing PDF menus online, and making that easy for restaurant owners to update certain menu items and have it update anywhere their menu was. So whether that was on social media, whether that was on Google Maps, whether that was on their own website, Yelp, it all updates seamlessly. And then in 2011, we ended up licensing that technology to a huge food distributor. And then that's when I started Foodsby. And Foodsby was kind of created with my co-founder, Ben Couture, and he had an idea about sort of food delivery models, and I had a lot of experience at restaurants at the time. A lot of them were trying to figure out how to process more orders that were takeout versus dining in. So we essentially figured out how to create a crowdsourced delivery platform for large office buildings in the suburbs. So if you worked at 3M in the suburbs and you didn't want to go to your cafeteria every day, you could essentially order from restaurants that never delivered, right? So like Chipotle wouldn't deliver one burrito to you, but through our platform, they would essentially deliver one burrito to you, but at the same time, 30 of your other coworkers might have ordered for that same delivery time, and then they would make one delivery for 30 to 35 orders. But it felt like a personal experience for you. So we did that, grew that. It's still, I think, one of the most successful startups here in Minnesota. They raised a ton of money. I ended up exiting a year and a half ago or so from that company. And then I started Vēmos, which is in the nightlife industry, and we do data analytics for nightlife. Essentially, if you guys are familiar with how e-commerce sites work and how traffic is taken to e-commerce sites, we did the same thing for physical brick and mortar hospitality venues. Our secret sauce is we take government issued ID data, so like passports, driver's licenses. We scan those and we match it with credit card transactions in the point of sale so that we can understand every single person that walks in the door, who they are, how much they're spending, what they're buying, and that gives a personalized experience back to them and brings it back more often.
Cool.
Awesome.
That's where we're at today.
That's great summary of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you just went through like 5 of my questions all at once, and yeah. I guess one of them is you kind of like went over your education a little bit, but I know we've kind of talked before about you have mixed feelings about you like studying entrepreneurship. I don't know if you want to talk about that?
Yeah, I mean, I think you've already realized part of this conversation I'm like a super blunt dude. I think for me it was, again, I don't think entrepreneurship can be taught. personally. I think that there are parts of entrepreneurship that are hard skills like accounting, finance, technology, development, research, right? Those are all hard skills that are required, but I don't think anyone can sit in a classroom and be like, hey Kate, this is the formula to get to $0 of revenue to $1 million, right? I mean, there's not a formula out there, and I don't think there ever will be, which is, I think, the beauty of entrepreneurship and starting your own company and seeing what's out there. So yeah, I mean, like I said, I kind of thought business school was that sort of model of, here's 300 new entrepreneurs that all want to start their own business. We're all going to hang out, have fun, bounce ideas off of each other, figure it out, and it just didn't end up being the case, which I think is really my fault, not the university's fault. And I wish, in hindsight, I would have done more in computer science. I don't have a degree. I've somewhat been self-taught, but still not that smart on that side. So I think that, to me, was a more important skill. So I'm envious of someone like you who has the ability to do your own product.
Thanks. I guess knowing you're incredibly smart, and so I wouldn't do that. Real, could you get the computer back on? But yeah. So I guess like moving on from audience here. Do you guys have any questions about like kind of like his background and like how he got here? Okay. I guess we'll kind of move on to like some of your experiences and challenges.
Actually, I do have some questions, but how do you use this one?
Oh, okay. I'll ask the question first and then I'll get that working. So what do you think are the most important traits of an entrepreneur?
Question. I think first and foremost for me, it's always been perseverance. Like, I think if you talk to any entrepreneur, they absolutely will tell you that there was probably at least 100 times in their life where they should have quit and definitely would have went bankrupt. And I think most people do end up doing that. So if you are really confident with what you're building and you have a vision for it, you have to be ready to take the risk, and you have to be ready to literally sacrifice every single thing in your life for what you're doing. I can tell you there's definitely moments in my life where I had like $6 in my bank account. I was ready to live in my car. I was more than happy to do that because of the belief I had in what we were building. So I think that's like the number one thing. I think if you have that, and it's easy to say, I think the action is much different than what's the reality. I think beyond that, I think being critical and willing to take criticism, I think, is the big thing. And this is where I think generally Minnesotans struggle with is like, they don't like criticism. They don't like someone saying they hate their idea. And what I always respond with, like, I think if you're an entrepreneur, you should have a level of confidence and ego about yourself that, like, you're gonna make it no matter what. And so, for me to tell you, oh, great job, shouldn't impact you at all. Like, I want to hear where I suck, right? Like, I want people to be like, that idea sucks, or this piece of this is you're doing a bad job at, or hey, we were expecting this, but we didn't get this, and this is why, because that's where I learn. I don't need someone to pick me up because I pick myself up every day. It's more about, are you willing to listen to anybody, regardless of their background, right? Are you willing to say, hey, someone is confused about what I just said, like my elevator speech. Okay, that was confusing, you don't understand it? That means that I haven't done a good enough job. That's not saying that that person's stupid or that person just doesn't understand that. No, I'm doing something wrong, and I think to me that's a trait of really good entrepreneurs. Like the best in the world have that sort of mindset, and they surround themselves with people that aren't afraid of telling them that they're wrong or that they failed or something needs to be improved.
Cool.
Yeah.
So how do you decide on employees and especially like co-founders?
Yeah.
Like, how do you pick someone that I've heard it's described like a marriage.
I think I've never been married, so, but I think so. I mean, I have a co-founder that I've been with for, 12 years now, 11 years? I don't even know. But like, I feel like I'm married to her. She's actually married, and I feel like I spend more time with her than her husband does with her. So yeah, I think so. I think a true co-founder, one is you have to be ready to find someone who's the opposite of you, right? And that comes back to what I was saying before, like people who are great are so well aware of their weaknesses. They're well aware of who they are, what they're really, really good at, and more importantly, what they're really, really crappy at. And part of like what we learn throughout our entire education process is how to be mediocre, right? Like when you look at a report card, you're like, oh, that's a C. No one points out the A, right? And then it's like, okay, you need to get that C to an A. Well, in the real world, it doesn't work that way, right? It's, you can hire for your C or D or F, but it's really important how to get your A to an A plus to, you know, you're the best at this one thing. And so having that mindset, I think you have to be critical of finding a co-founder that has those skills that are very different than yours. You guys have a very trusting relationship where you're not afraid to have an argument or have multiple arguments. I mean, I argue with my co-founder, like I'm talking big arguments on a weekly basis. I think that's healthy. I think that's something that needs to happen because great ideas are formed because of debate and through these different hard conversations. So I think instead of just finding a co-founder, which a lot of people do, and they just find their friends, I think, like I said, going after those certain traits that you think are really meaningful and finding people who are willing to take the risk with you and have those same, you know, traits of perseverance and willing to do it all for the company, I think are important.
I actually have a few follow-up questions on that. So let's say for example we are considering it as a marriage, right? So you kind of would like to date a girl for some time before you decide to marry, right? So do you have tried that to recommend the same thing, like you kind of spend some time with the person understanding about the way they think before committing to a long-term relationship?
Yeah, I think so. I think every good marriage should have a prenup, and that's what companies are, right? You have a legal contract that gets formed, and I think you should have outs in that. So, you know, if you and I are co-founders, we don't know if it's going to work out, and I guarantee you, most likely it won't work out. So we need to both be in a situation where the business isn't hurt if you and I don't work out or split. And so I think having a good agreement in place that allows either of us to exit out of the business in a safe and productive manner, having the ability to vest our equity or shares over time based on how much input we're doing to the business, I think is really, really important. But again, it's that dating period. I mean, if you're not having hard conversations at the beginning, it's going to be too late by the time you get into the marriage, right?
Yeah.
To figure out, like, it shouldn't always be just because I find you attractive, so I'm going to marry you. Like, no, we got to figure out, like, can we live together? How does it, like, day-to-day life? What does that look like? So I think the more open and honest that you can be with your partners, the better off you're going to be in the long run.
So when, let's say you're starting something with someone, right, and you kind of have to have a legal agreement, and that means you kind of have to maybe decide. So let's say equity decision, right? Do you recommend having such discussions in the beginning itself, or you think that it has to happen after you have at least worked for some time together to understand who could be how much, you know?
I think it has to happen in the beginning, but that's an opinion.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is because what ends up happening, I see this a lot with entrepreneurs, is they have this great idea, they're with their friends, they're excited. Everyone that I know, including myself, at the beginning of the company believes in 3 years they're going to be on a yacht, running the world, and a multi-billionaire, right? Like, that's just the reality of entrepreneurship. They're never thinking about the failures. They're thinking about how great this company is going to be. So it's going to be like, well, yeah, the three of us, we'll figure out how to spend $1 billion, no problem, right? Like, ooh, that's an easy problem to have, but it just doesn't work that way, right? So for me, if it happens at the beginning, then you don't have to have that hard conversation later, you know, in 2 years where things aren't going well and, you know what, guys, we have to put more capital into this business. We got to work longer hours. Who's going to sacrifice? And one person's like, I'm not. And they're like, okay, well, you're going to take less equity. And you're like, no, I'm not. And now you're 2 years into building this product or building this company, and now the IP the intellectual property is owned by nobody, it's confusing, there's all these weird conversations that happen. And that's why I recommend just have it at the beginning, create a very fluid structure at the beginning, which can be later, more detail oriented, but at least you have some fluid relationship, and then you know the intellectual property is owned by this entity, and then if someone is less committed, someone puts in capital, someone does this, it's all kind of taken care of.
Yeah, so like the point you touched upon right now, like a fluid structure, right?
Yeah.
Or let's say, I mean, I know some people who kind of, let's say, let's start a company, two of us, let's do 50-50, right? Do you think that's a better idea? Like, what do you mean by fluid? Can it be more?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm so anti 50-50 relationships because someone has to make a decision at the end of the day. And investors, it depends on the type of company, I should say. I specifically have focused on high growth companies, tech companies that require investment capital, that require some type of exit down the road. So for that, a 50-50 relationship is very hard because investors don't want to invest in those companies. The reason they don't want to invest in those companies is because at any point in time, one person can just do a stalemate and just say, I'm not going to make any decision, and the capital is stuck in the company, and then nothing happens, right? So I think 51-49 at the bare minimum, and I know that's a hard conversation, but what I love about my relationship with my co-founder, I'll get back to answering your question, is that we are so opposite and we're so open to each other's strengths. I can't do what she does, and she can't do what I do, but we're not jealous of each other. When I started my first company, Lunchbox, it was a very prototypical 4 friends. We were all living together. We were best friends. We all were interested in starting a company. Probably some of the greatest times of my life ended in a court legal battle because people went their separate ways when they graduated. People had different ideas of the business. There was a lot of jealousy that happened, right? Because, oh, someone's in the limelight because they're a salesperson versus someone's in the background because they're someone else. You have to have these conversations at the beginning. And you have to realize that, like anything in life, if you're part of a team, the team itself and the company is way more important than any individual. And if you have that mindset, you truly believe in that mindset, then you're never going to have this reason to be jealous. So with that said, I think you have to, from the beginning, highlight everyone's roles. And by a fluid structure, what I mean is, it's very easy to set up a structure where if the 3 of us are co-founders, we all earn equity, even at the same rate, over the amount of time we work. So essentially, like, if Kate decides a year from now she's too cool for us, and she leaves, she still gets her equity, but then we keep earning on top of that, so we're diluting her equity essentially over time. Does that make sense?
Kind of. So let's say, so you're saying, let's say we start off with something and you're saying she has worked for a year. All of us have worked for a year.
Yeah.
So you mean that all of us own 33 right now, is it?
Yeah.
And then if we are working more, we kind of are diluting her equity.
Right.
I see what you're saying.
Yep. So that's a really great way to start at the beginning, because it's also very difficult to have the conversation of who's worth more, right? Like, it's just a tough conversation to have.
Yeah.
So if we all just say, oh no, we're all gonna work, part-time 20 hours a week and we're all worth pretty much the same. You get 10,000 shares, I get 10,000 shares, you get 10,000 shares for the first year. But then if Kate drops off, then we both get an additional 10,000 shares for the second year, but now your shares are diluted so you have less of a percentage, right? And then you can grow it. Then when you get to the capital raising and other things, you can figure it out. But I think that's a great way to start. Totally recommend getting a good attorney from the beginning. It's worth, not going to the bar for a couple of days and spending that money on a good attorney. But yeah, I think that's a great way to be easy and not make a disaster happen.
So actually, just one more. So based on this, right? So there are different philosophies out there about equity split, right? And I want your personal view on 2 of the philosophies, right? So one thing is that sometimes they kind of decide based on seed funding. So who is investing how much, and you kind of decide based on that. And second thing is also just go with the flow, or like go with the dynamic structure. But at the time of first investment, that's when you kind of take the call. So what do you think about those 2 ways? Your views?
Yeah. So this is actually like my attorney, who I think is the greatest in the world, told me this that made it really easy to understand. He said, put a value on the company from day one. It could be something nominal like $100,000, right? Everyone agrees to that number. It doesn't matter what it is. And then put a value on everything you do, right? So if we all work 20 hours a week, well, let's just do easy math. We're all worth $20 an hour, you know, whatever that looks like, and we're worth $50,000 a year, whatever that is, right? Easy math. Put everything at a dollar amount. So then when you put in capital, you can put it at the same dollar amount. So if I invest $20,000 in cash, then it's easy for me to do the math to say what that's worth to the business. And now there isn't an argument that happens to say, well, cash is more important than this is more important than that. It's like, no, everything has a value. And when you hire, you do the same thing, right? You say, okay, this position is worth $100,000 a year, but we can't afford that, so we're willing to give half of that in equity. Okay, now it's super easy to determine what the value of that equity is versus how much cash you're paying to that employee or that next person, whoever's in there. And then as the company grows, right, you can keep increasing the valuation, but you're still using that same formula to calculate how that works.
Cool. Okay, so I'm gonna ask you, like, kind of moving away from that, like, you talked a little bit, about like your strengths and weaknesses, but also what are your like business success and failures? Like, when have you like felt like you really made it, and what were your lowest moments?
I mean, a ton of lowest moments for sure. I would say definitely throughout my whole career, like, it's always hard to hear no. I think when you believe in something that you're creating, right, and you're passionate about and what you're up to. So I think a lot of that early on was just like getting through that sort of situation, whether that was with my high school company or even in college, like, hey, no, we just don't see a value in this. We don't see where this is. We're not willing to pay for it. Whatever that looks like was definitely hard. I think for me, always the hard part has been when you don't have capital, how do you find capital? And for me, it's always been dipping into my savings or finding unique ways to raise money. I've been, and still today, it's not like it's been a lot different. Like, I've been very poor by my adult life. And so, like, I think not being able to go out with friends a lot of times because I can't afford to, keeping up with, you know, the Joneses of like, well, I've got some, you know, a lot of friends that graduated got great jobs, investment bankers and stuff that were buying nice cars and taking women out on nice dates and all that stuff. And I was like, I can't do any of that stuff. But at the end of the day, I knew what I was building and what I was excited to do, and that made me happier than doing any of those other things. So definitely a lot of moments like that. I vividly remember a moment where, like I said, I had about $6.28 or something left in my checking account, and I had rent due in like 5 or 7 days, and I just didn't want to like call my parents or like ask for help, and I needed to make this sale to like do it, and I made this sale, and it was like the lowest and greatest point of my life, right, where it was like, wow, I could really be living in my car here pretty soon. And it was like, I was against the wall. I had to convince this customer, like, we got this, we're gonna make you money, this is worth it, it's a value. And like, when you get that check, you're just like, holy cow. Like, how did that happen? Like, it was the coolest moment of my life. And I think for me, it's always the journey that makes everything worth it. And everyone kind of looks at successful entrepreneurs and they look at things that don't matter, right? They look at how great they are, their net worth, their cars and their houses and all these things, where I think if you asked any of these guys, even like Bezos, and you know, what was their fondest memories, I think it's the journey. I think it's when they had nothing and they had to figure out ways to be creative, and no one would give them capital, no one would invest in their business. I mean, you hear like Zuckerberg talk a lot, like no one was willing to invest early on in Facebook, and everyone was like, social network, what the hell is this, you know? And it's cool to hear those stories, right? Because you like grind and you work, and now it's like, who wouldn't have invested in Facebook when they were, you know, a hot or not site? I would have been a multimillionaire by now. So it's just cool to hear that. So definitely with that, I think another high for me was when we really got Foodsby off the ground and we raised our second round of financing. We were really growing in the right direction. I felt like we had a great team, and then eventually when the private equity companies came in and bought us out it was a cool feeling to have that first, I would say, real successful exit versus like a smaller exit. Something to put what I was doing and what me and my co-founder was doing on the map, and get some buzz around that. So yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. So, kind of with that, like, what was the best advice you ever received?
My best advice I ever received was actually an entrepreneurship club. I don't remember who gave this to me, which I want to try to figure out. So I'm trying to get someone to tell.
And to club at the U?
Yeah, at the U. It was like my freshman year of college, and this gentleman said something that was like, he's like, my goal in life is to be the dumbest person in my company. And I was like, what? And he's like, yeah, because if I'm the dumbest person in my company, then we have a really smart organization. I think he swore a couple times in there too, but I was like, wow, I never thought about that, right, for a second. Like, I think growing up, I was always sort of taught to want to be the smartest person in the room. And that like totally flipped the equation for me of like, it's not about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the smartest to hire the smarter people in the room, to bring them on your team and get someone to believe in your vision. So for me, that's still true in my company, that I'm the dumbest person in any of my organizations, and I make sure that I only hire people way smarter than I am, which is not hard, by the way.
You brag on yourself way too much.
Seriously, and actually, so I had the same point because I've heard you say that, and I've seen on blogs as well about the same thing, that you always consider, hiring the smarter than you, right? And even I've seen you multiple times here as well saying, I feel that you're too humble, and is there
I'm not humble. I'm actually really, really cocky. No, I'm serious. If you ask anyone who really knows me, and I'm not afraid to say it, like, I will tell you right now that entrepreneurs, to me, are probably one of the most egotistic people in the world. Like, I would be doing what I'm doing if I didn't have this ridiculous belief that all the hardship that I would be going through is going to be successful, and that I'm going to be the person that's going to make it successful with a great team. But the reason I say this, and it's not that I'm putting myself down. I tell this to my parents a lot too, right? When you're really smart, you expect everyone around you to be smart. Okay? And it's actually a really big flaw. So you expect people to understand what you're saying. You expect people to have this level of competency that you're used to. The reality is the world's problems are really simple, right? They're typically really simple solutions. But most people who are here aren't looking down here. But when you're dumb, you ask dumb questions, right? You're like, why are people sending faxes when, like, I can send you a digital version of something and you're like, well, let me tell you the security reasons, blah, you know what I mean? Like, that's where people go immediately that are intelligent. And so for me, I've always come in and understood the ground level of how these industries work, and I'm not afraid to say, hey, restaurant, like, why do you print these orders out, and what do you do with this information? Like, most people wouldn't ask those questions. And so that's the reason I kind of speak a lot about that is it's been a huge reason for my success is because I don't look at things so complex. I look at things very simplified because my brain doesn't get that complex.
Extremely valuable words here, I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
So, where do you, I guess going off of that, we'll end it there, where do you think technology is headed, especially in food and entertainment? What do you think is the future? Predicting the future is a hard question.
Here's where I'll answer that question. So I love thinking about this. This is what keeps me up at night. The world is so different, and even from when I was a kid to now, but like I look at my parents, and like, we're all somewhat in a similar age group. Like, that generation went from being born to seeing the first black and white television, right, in their lifetime, to the first color television, to the first phone system, to the first fax system, to seeing the internet for the first time ever, to now having computers literally as powerful as anything in their hands. I mean, that's an incredible feat to be, I think that's the most amount of change that any lifetime that anyone else will ever go through. So to me, the future is all about personalization, right? I think we all want to feel liked and welcomed and have short attention spans, so we want to get the information as quickly as possible. So you look at a lot of things in entertainment, it's previously been about large events, large things happening, groups of people that would come together and meet at one location because they couldn't text each other, right? And saying, we're going to meet here at 6 o'clock, and if you don't show up, well, we don't know if you're going to be dead or if you're not going to come up at all. To now, we're expecting this personal service, right? We're expecting this level of, you go to Amazon.com, and Amazon already knows what I want before I even know what I want. And that's the life we live in. We're getting ads that are based on our search history, based on our location history, based on all this information. And so, to me, entertainment has to match that. We, as the new generation, are spending more money on experiences than we are on cars and assets and things that previously people have spent money on. But we want that interaction, right? We want that thing. So I think VR and AR is going to be huge. I think we were talking about stadiums earlier, and I made this is 2 years ago, I made a bet with someone else, $1 million bet. I said, in 20 years, so 18 more years, stadiums will be obsolete. I said, people won't go to stadiums anymore. They won't go to TCF Bank Stadium. They won't go to US Bank Stadium. They'll be like the Coliseum. People will go there to like do tours, and you'll bring your kids to be like, Daddy and Mommy sat here one day to watch this game that happened, but no one's gonna go there because I think that experience isn't great, right? We're gonna want that experience of being on the field or being part of the players or having a personalized experience in that realm. So I think VR and AR are gonna be our norm. I think we're gonna want, again, when it comes to personalization, what we drink, where we go, what we eat, dietary restrictions, all of this stuff on us, we're not afraid to share that. Like, our generation is cool in the sense that, like, we aren't afraid about privacy the way other people have been afraid about privacy. I'm not saying it's not important, I'm just saying we're not afraid to share that because in return, we're getting information that is meaningful for us. So when I walk into a restaurant, I want to see a menu that's only for me, right? Like, I don't want to see a bunch of items on a menu. I want to see the 7 items that that they know I'm going to eat. Like, that's going to be revolutionary someday when that happens. Like, we're building at Vēmos, for example, we're building our first consumer app where you can start a bar tab from your phone. So you don't have to go and give a credit card anymore. It's all seamless. It's like an Uber or Lyft experience, right? And the big reason for that is data collection, so that brands, like Budweiser and Jim Beam and so on and so forth can understand who's actually drinking their liquor for the first time in on-premise locations at bars. They don't know this information, right? And so they have no way of reaching out. They have no way of saying, thank you, this Bud Light's on us today because you bought the last 20. That stuff is coming, and it's exciting. I think it's an exciting state of mind that we're in. These festivals and all that kind of stuff. So, yeah. Cool.
So, do you have any advice for young entrepreneurs for like getting started and?
Yes, to a degree. I would say, first and foremost, if you're interested in startups and entrepreneurship, you don't have to be the founder. I think that's a big misconception a lot of times, is that people think they either have to be a founder or have to work for corporate America, and there's like no in between. I think that it's super cool to be the 8th employee or the 15th employee or whatever of the next greatest startup. And I think a lot of times founders are a different beast and take on burdens that most people can't or won't, and so just be aware of that, right? Like, be okay with, hey, being the main founder may not be for me, but I really, really am excited about innovation, and I'm excited about doing something more than this one minor role that I might get at a corporation, and I want to get involved in different things. Hey, let's join a startup. Let me get some stock. Let me get paid a salary, because guess what? It's nice to be able to get paid every once in a while. But if you're gonna do it, like, don't quit. Like, it's not an option for you. And I think too many people go into startups thinking it's cool, and they just don't get why. And if you're doing it for the money, or if you're doing it for the appeal, I think it's gonna wear off very quickly. I don't think it's cool any longer.
Well, I don't know, Raul, or if any of you guys have more questions.
I do have a few questions actually. So I mean, yeah, let's talk and continue from the same point that you said, right? So you're saying that working as an 8th or 10th employee could be a great experience. You're saying that it's definitely, you have to go through the failures of the startup as well.
Yeah.
But you think that it's gonna come out much better. Like you are much more happy about the experiences. What you really mean, right?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of people, the reality is there's 1% or less than 1% of the population, right, that is going to be the founder of a significant startup that's going to IPO. But what people don't realize is that, like, if you were the 227th employee of Facebook, when they went public, you were worth $12 million or $15 million, right? I mean, you got paid a salary your entire time, a good salary for that matter, and you were part of the exit, you were part of that founding team. That doesn't mean you have to be Zuckerberg, right? There's something to knowing what your role is and where you really feel you want to be a part of. And for some reason, I find being in Minnesota and the Midwest specifically that everyone wants to have that CEO title, but they don't have what it takes to be a CEO. And that's okay. Like, it's okay. It's not a big deal. It's not the end of the world. I mean, most people can't and most people shouldn't. And there's days where I feel like I would rather be a 12th employee of a company and I could succeed the same way. So I just think you need to know if you're ready to take that leap and ready to deal with all the emotions that come with starting a company versus joining one.
Yeah. Can you share some of those emotions?
Absolutely. It's lonely. It's really lonely. And if you don't have the confidence to be lonely all the time, it's hard. I mean, I can't tell you how many late nights I spent in the office, way past my staff. I can't tell you how many times that I can't go hang out with friends because a client calls me at 10 o'clock and goes, hey, something's wrong, and I gotta be the one that fixes it, right? I mean, it's lonely. It's super lonely. And the beauty of working in a large corporation is that you're surrounded by your peers or people, right? Because past college, it's hard to make friends, right? You're kind of surrounded by a lot of people, and if you work at a small business with 4 people originally, I mean, that's kind of all you know your whole life. And so it gets lonely, and if you don't have that confidence to go, what I'm doing is great, and I wake up every morning feeling happier that I'm here working and getting on my emails and building the next solution when everyone else is Snapchatting how great their night is. I mean, I felt it before. I mean, I have.
But you think it's worth it? You love it?
I love it. I couldn't do anything different. Mm-hmm. It's not about the money for me. It's a benefit at the end of the day if it happens, but for me, I can't think of anything else to do in my world. I would do this. If you wrote me a $100 million check today, my life would not change because this is what I love.
Awesome, yeah. So, one more thing that I want to know is, let's say, like for example, based on my understanding about the way you have approached different things throughout your life, right? it's more, I see that the gist of more towards doing some innovation versus, so there are two types, right? There's one specific kind which is like, fixed towards a cause, let's say, and they want to do something on that cause itself. Versus there's a kind where it's fixed towards an innovation, it could be for any cause. So I mean, for example, right now you are in Foodsby, you are in the restaurant area, and were you like always enthusiastic about it, then that's why you ended up being there? Or you just wanted to innovate something and life took you there?
For me, life took me there. I was never passionate, nor have I worked in hospitality ever before. I just, out of pure necessity for me, and it led me to this industry, and then as I dug deeper in this industry, there was more and more problems that I uncovered, and so I just kind of stayed there. But no, I'm just passionate about solving problems. I mean, sometimes I wish I was an entrepreneur that was like super passionate about an industry and like wanted to solve something there, but I just like solving problems.
Yeah. So right now, after so long being in this industry, do you want to you are fully committed to this, or you think still some problem can come up and you can go ahead and solving that problem?
I feel like I can solve any problem, but I like this industry. I think it's an industry that's not going anywhere. I think it's an industry that is ripe for innovation because it honestly hasn't even innovated since like the 1980s when the point of sale systems first came out. So, I mean, I think it's ripe for innovation, and that excites me a lot.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So yeah, a little bit about Foodsby. So you quit it around 1.5 years ago, right? If I'm not wrong.
Yeah.
Right. Would you like to maybe share like what was the experience, or like till it is okay to understand that what situations or reasons could be for somebody to not continue something like that?
What do you mean by not?
In the sense, was it because
why did you move on? So.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a really good question. So for me, the reason I moved on was I really like the startup phase. Like I like the start of things. I like solving problems. I like being the guy that walks in to the first customer and convinces that first customer why this new idea that never has been built before is going to be the greatest thing ever, and getting them to sign the piece of paper. And with Foodsby, in a good way, we got to the point where it was just a churn and burn, right? We could hire almost any salesperson off the street. They could make 3 phone calls, and that would result into 2 sales, and they would repeat the process over and over and over again. And I just kind of got an offer that I really wanted to do, and I wanted to pursue Vēmos, and it just worked out for me in that capacity.
I see. Interesting. Yeah, and Foodsby has been super successful as well. They've raised like around 21 or something, right?
Yeah, they've done really, really well, and my co-founder Ben continues to amaze me and grow that company, and they've got some great partners and venture capital, private equity firms behind them. So, yeah.
Awesome.
I'm excited about the future.
Yeah, and for Vēmos then, so is there any next steps that you're looking for towards the investment?
We actually just closed a lot of financing, like a week ago or 2 weeks ago. So yeah, right now we have some metrics that we're hitting, and then we're going to raise another round here in Q2, Q3.
Oh, interesting.
So,
wow.
Yeah, we're pretty jazzed about what we're doing and the innovation we're doing, and finally that we think the industry is catching up to wanting this type of innovation.
Awesome. Yeah, and actually for the folks who are from Minneapolis, I mean, can you share some of the local resources that they have access to?
Yeah.
Things that could be super useful for a
There are a ton of great local resources. I think Minnesota actually does a really good job of this, and I think a lot of them are untapped too, for that matter. So there's a lot of good local groups here. So Mini does a great job of putting on great events locally here. I think this Thursday's Mini demo. Is that tomorrow? Jeez, yeah, tomorrow. So I mean, I think you can just show up, or I technically need tickets, but I just kind of show up. So
I think tickets are still open.
They're still open. Yeah. So I mean, I think being part of that community, I think there's a lot of great resources. I know the University of Minnesota specifically has I don't know what they officially call, like a legal arm, like a nonprofit legal arm or whatever.
Yeah, there's the business law clinic that I've
Yes.
utilized before, and that's been great.
Cool.
And then there's like Legal Core too, which is outside the U.
Okay,
that
cool.
I've taken advantage of.
Awesome, yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of great resources there. There's a lot of like funds that are available for grants and stuff for entrepreneurs here, depending on what types of stuff you're doing. If you're using university resources, there's a commercialization office here on campus that I know puts a lot of capital into companies and helps them grow and things like that. I personally, I think you'll find if you need help and you reach out to somebody, whether that's an attorney, an accountant, a business leader, and you're just upfront with them and say, listen, I need help, I don't have money. I honestly don't think I've never been turned away. That's been my experience. I find people here to be super helpful and they want you to succeed and they want you to grow. Most of the mentors here are very open to getting together. I hear the opposite a lot of times from mentors, and I've been a mentor in a lot of different organizations, is we don't get reached out to enough. We're underutilized. So I would say reach out constantly until you get the, hey, you're bugging me email, which honestly probably won't happen. I would say get as much out of what you can as possible. Use as many university resources as you can. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you guys have any questions?
One question. I mean, these days, I mean, what you can see is there are a lot of students or individuals who are into this startup thing. And given a situation that you are working on some product and you are in a process and you come to know someone has come up with it and has reached the market. So how will you proceed it? Will you stop? How will you go with that thing?
Yeah. I mean, I think you got to ask yourself or your business partners questions, right? Why are we better?
Mm-hmm.
Are we better? Maybe you're not better, right? Can we make it cheaper? What is your secret innovation or what's your secret sauce that makes you unique? I mean, the reality to most problems is there's some solution out there for them. It just may not be the best solution. So what do you do differently, or what is out there? Why isn't, I find competition to be great because the first question I ask is, why didn't you buy it, right? Because your competitor isn't going to have been sold to every one of your customers. So someone's would have said no at some point. So being okay, why didn't you buy this service or product that this competitor offered? And they're well, it didn't have these things. Well, is that important for you? Oh yeah, it is. Okay, now maybe that's a place to go. But yeah, just ask a lot of questions.
And one more doubt was when you are into a market where your competitor is kind of a global company,
Mm-hmm.
like Samsung, which has gained the trust of your customers for a long, long time.
Sure.
So how we can, competing with those big companies is how to deal with those things when it comes to competing with a global company.
Yeah, I mean, not easy, right? But I think you have to look at this as an opportunity. Large companies are slow moving. They're not innovative anymore. They're people that typically acquire companies versus start and research and grow their own internally. So whatever Samsung or whatever any of these big companies are doing, they're still missing a component, right? They're still out there missing something. So you've got to figure out why you're different, why you're unique. Until I understand that, I think that's hard, right? To sort of give you specifics. So, you got to be doing something that's so much better or so much different than everyone else in the market. Even though some other big company might be solving a problem, you're still doing something that's different.
Mm-hmm. But at the end, it comes to how you convince the customer about I mean, given an example, if there is a cell phone from Samsung,
Yeah.
and if I come up with some cell phone, and I keep the cost comparatively very low.
But what does cost have to do with this?
I mean, there is one point which I would say it's my selling point. I would say for that particular device or that particular product, I would say if Samsung is selling it at 30K, in dollars it's $900, and if I say I'll be delivering the same thing in 400 thing, so won't customer doubt me? Okay, if he's selling me at $400, he might be doing something wrong with some.
Absolutely.
So how to, and if you're not doing so, and you're doing.
But why are you better? Why are you selling it at a cheaper price if you're the same?
Yeah.